Great, thank you so much. Can everyone see in here? I think it should be okay. Good.
Looks great.
Okay. Well, again, many thanks to the Equalize program and especially to Robin Goforth for all her mentorship. So my venture is entitled Porine Therapeutics, and we are trying to revolutionize the way cardiovascular disease is treated. So I am Dr. Julie Goodwin. I'm Associate Professor of Pediatrics and Division Chief of Nephrology at Yale University School of Medicine. I am a practicing clinician. I'm also an investigator in the Vascular Biology and Therapeutics program at Yale. And my expertise is in vascular inflammation, steroid microenvironments, endothelial cell biology, and Wnt signaling. And the problem we're trying to tackle is cardiovascular disease, which is a major worldwide public health problem that continues to increase. So for example, since 2010, the FDA has approved nearly 30 new drugs for the treatment of cardiovascular disease. However, the incidence continues to increase. In 2015, there were 17.3 million deaths, totaling more than $316 billion in healthcare costs and lost productivity. Just last year, the global cardiovascular disease drug market totaled more than $79 billion. And by 2030, it's estimated that more than 23 million people will die from cardiovascular disease. So clearly some new approaches are needed. Currently, besides addressing modifiable lifestyle factors, the mainstay of therapy for cardiovascular disease is through the use of lipid-lowering agents, which are the vast majority of the mechanistic ways that the 30 drugs that have recently been approved are working. However, the Wnt signaling pathway has been shown to be important in the pathogenesis of cardiovascular disease, yet there is no current therapy targeting this pathway that is approved for treatment. So we are hoping to change that. This is some data that my lab generated. So here I'm showing some mouse aortas on the left that have been isolated and stained with something called oil red O. So anywhere you see red, that is lipid deposition. So on the far left, I have a wild type control aorta with no red staining, so no lipid. And then I have two mouse models of atherosclerosis. One is the standard ApoE knockout model in the middle, and then on the right is a model called DKO, which is a more severe model of atherosclerosis that my lab developed and published. And so these are animals that have been fed a high-fat diet for 12 weeks, either with or without concurrent treatment with LGK974, which is a Wnt inhibitor, for 8 weeks. And so you can clearly see, I hope, that in both models, treatment with the inhibitor results in about a 50% reversal of aortic lipid deposition. So in addition to this novel reversal, we can also show a lipid lowering effect shown here on the far left of about 50% of cholesterol levels in both models that we tested. In addition, this drug has two novel mechanistic components that are not represented by any current drugs. So the first is mitigation of inflammatory cytokines. For example, IL-6 and IL-10, which are both highly pro-inflammatory, can be decreased substantially in the serum of animals treated with the inhibitor. And secondly, restoration of fuel preference defects, for example, fatty acid oxidation in endothelial cells, which is what is represented here. Fatty acid oxidation has been shown to be very important in the progression from inflammation to fibrosis. And so the novelty of our therapy really lies in these additional two mechanistic insights, as well as the lipid lowering effect, which is present in most drugs that are already existing for this purpose. So to date, I have been awarded about $3 million in NIH funds to study this mechanism. As far as the IP, we have secured a patent with the notice of allowance, and we're waiting for the final patent issuance. The patent allows for Wnt inhibitors as a broad drug class to be used in the treatment of a variety of cardiovascular diseases. So this really represents a novel first-in-class opportunity. And so to summarize, I have spent the last 5 to 6 years identifying the importance of this signaling pathway. I've generated key data in vitro and in vivo. We've completed patent examination, as I mentioned, and I'm really seeking support in two areas. So first, scientifically, I'm seeking seed funding of about $350,000, and that will be used for 2 studies, both in rodent models. The first is a comparative efficacy study of my inhibitor versus PCSK9 inhibitors and statins, which are 2 of the drug classes which are considered most effective for the treatment of cardiovascular disease. And secondly, for a maximum tolerated dose and 10-day range finding study. And then secondly, I am in need of some team building and business expertise, and I need assistance in identifying a CEO for the company. And I would like to be able to move to the point where we can market the project to be able to raise institutional funds. So again, this is Corine Therapeutics. We are hoping to revolutionize cardiovascular disease treatment, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Chris Garabedian, can we go to you for the first question or comment?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, really nice presentation, Julie. So I know the Wnt inhibitor class has been, well described and has looked at cancer applications and all of that. And so if you could, and first of all, the data and reversal is very interesting. So you've done a good job highlighting that translational data. But help me understand how this might be differentiated from other Wnt inhibitors, and if you have any comparative data versus others in that class. And then maybe the corollary to that is, what have you learned that might influence or shape your understanding of this class that might make you think differently about development?
So with regard to the first point, I mean, this particular inhibitor is the only one that I have data on, although the patent allows for new compositions of matter. So potentially we could build off of this one. I'm well aware that Wnt inhibitors are sort of handled with kid gloves in terms of worry about side effects and those sorts of things. And it is true that they are mainly used in the oncology space. This is, as far as I am aware, the only one that is being studied in the context of cardiovascular disease. And the way that we came to this discovery was through a genomic screen and next generation sequencing. So I think that part is quite novel. It's not readily, I wouldn't say it's particularly obvious that these should work in this class of drugs. So I'm not sure I'm not aware of other data out there that would be looking at Wnt inhibitors in cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, the main point is other people will look at your work and maybe follow once you establish that proof of concept. But no, really nice presentation, and thank you for your answer.
Sure.
Thanks, Chris. Meghana?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. No, great job. Maybe just stepping back a little bit and just looking at the bigger sort of problem here from your clinical perspective. I mean, what are the explanations for this rising incidence of cardiovascular disease? You have all these drugs out there. What's not working with the drugs? Is it particularly the mechanism of action with the drug? Are people not taking their pills? Are the lifestyles really changing? Like, I'm just trying to see in all those sort of factors that may be leading to the increased sort of incidence of the disease. How is the potential for this Wnt and this new novel mechanism of action to target lipid deposition kind of fitting into that picture?
Sure. So I think, partially my answer is a little bit speculative, but I think obviously the obesity epidemic, which I see even in children, is playing a large role. In my, with my hat as a nephrologist, I know that cardiorenal intersection and dialysis patients, kidney transplant patients, all of these severely affected kidney patients have tremendous cardiovascular disease because of the constant inflammation that their blood vessels are under due to metabolic derangements. So there is also a huge explosion in kidney disease that may be playing a role. And then, thinking about endothelial cells, which I spend a lot of time doing, it's been relatively recently recognized that these are not just sort of gatekeepers, they're metabolically active cells. And so this is what I've studied most. And there has been no therapy which has really looked at endothelial cells. Lipids are in the blood and they're measured in the blood, but there's no way to determine the cellular interface of those lipids. So those are some ideas I have.
Great, thanks, Julie. Thanks for that question. Chris Borner.
So first of all, thank you for highlighting the fact that cardiovascular disease is still the leading cause of death in many markets, including the US. And I think that continued focus of drug development here is going to be important. One of the challenges, though, is that while there's still considerable unmet need, there are a number of products that by the time this product would ultimately potentially get to market are going to be effective, not particularly effective for subsets of patients, but effective still and very cheap. And so one of the things you may wish to consider, and this is more of a comment than a question, is as you continue this development, is there a way to target in a very thoughtful and precise way those patients who do not get response to existing therapies? Because I think taking a novel approach is something that the field desperately needs, but I also think you have to be cognizant of exactly where there's going to be the most unmet need for a product that that may have these characteristics. But overall, a nice presentation and just something to think about going forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that comment.